Hi there, friends. My name is Yolanda Harper, and I am co founder of Harper Therapy. And today is Thursday. It is another stormy day out. Today, I am wanting to just share some thoughts with you and start a conversation about relationships. Everybody breathe now. Relationships and some straight talk about some of the myths about our marriages and about our relationships. So I was having a conversation with someone recently, and they were just sharing with me how they were upset that in their life people weren't upfront and truthful, that they weren't told the truth about relationships and about how hard they are. And so, one of the first myths about relationship is our kind of happily ever after thing that we are taught, but not taught in an outright way. We're taught kind of through society and expectations and media, and that, Disney view of the prince and the princess riding off into the sunset together. And so let's address that first myth of they lived happily ever after. And let's get real and say that relationships are just hard and messy because life is hard and messy. And relationships are a component of life. And unfortunately, our marriages and our romantic relationships and our time together as couples, we don't get a pass from that. We don't get a pass in those relationships from the hard things in life. And in fact, that's oftentimes where some of the hardest things do come because it matters so much to us. And part of it is the fact that we have really raised the bar when it comes to our romantic relationships and our expectations of marriage. In the past, our marriages have been very much a commodity. They have been, the man is the provider, the woman is the childbearer and the nurturer. There have been dowries. It's just been an interaction and an exchange in a lot of ways. Those days are long gone. Now we have higher expectations of our romantic relationships. We have more of a focus on this notion of love and romance, and for this to be the center of happiness in our world. And that's a lot of pressure to put on one relationship, and it's a lot of pressure to put on one person. So just that idea that every moment is going to be blissful and there are going to be rainbows and unicorns, that doesn't happen. That doesn't happen, but that doesn't mean that our relationships are flawed. That just means that we're human. That means that we're all human and doing the best that we can in a lot of situations. Another myth is, wow, my partner, they are just not the same person that I married. Okay, I'm going to be straight up honest with you guys. My husband, Shaman, and I met when we were 16 years old. We have dated and or been married for 28 years. Do the math or not. That is a long time. And I am just going to say, thank God that my husband is not the same person that he was at 16. He was great then. That's why, we met and we became friends and we fell in love. But let's be honest, it's a good thing that he's not still acting like a 16-year-old. And it's a good thing that I have grown and matured in that period of time too. Relationships are all about how our individual growth meshes with our partner's growth, and how we bring our own growth into our marriage relationship and into our romantic relationship. Part of the challenge is that our growth as individuals, as we are traveling together as a married couple, it's not always a linear path. We're not always growing at the same pace. Sometimes I'm in a growth period. I'm in a period of individual growth and learning more about myself and maturing. And sometimes my husband is in that state. So it's not always a linear process, and that's where we can kind of stumble along the way a little bit because we expect that we're going to grow at the same rate. Um, Oftentimes we meet back, we converge again after those periods of growth. Oftentimes one person grows and the other person is like, I'm not quite sure what's happening here. But I'm going to do what I can to be supportive of you as you go on your journey. And we kind of do that for each other. And oftentimes we converge again on our individual paths of growth as we grow together as a couple. And that's really cool. And that could lead to greater intimacy together as a couple. It helps build the foundation of um, the relationship and making it through hard times. Sometimes the convergence doesn't happen. Sometimes we are on our own path for so long that we kind of divert. And that can be really hard. But the convergence, that coming back together again after our partner grows or after we grow, that's always a possibility. When you take a look at your partner and you're like, man, they are just not the same person that I married. Right. They're not. And neither are you. You're not the same person that your partner married. The third myth that I want to talk about today is this romantic notion that, well, if it's meant to be, if our marriage, if our relationship is meant to be, then it will be easy. It should be no effort. It'll happen naturally. Does this sound familiar? Again, let's just have some straight up honest conversation. Honestly, when in your life has this ever been true? When has there been any good thing that has happened to you in your life that hasn't taken some effort, that hasn't been hard work? So why do we expect this to be the case in our marriages? It's not. Relationships take effort. Relationships take time, but it doesn't have to be as hard as we try to make it. Oftentimes when couples come in, all of the focus is on the hard stuff, the hard conversations, right? The problems. When we can do so much for our relationships and for our marriages by in the day-to-day actions of our lives, making each other a priority, remembering what things were like when we were dating, when we were courting each other, that playfulness, that dreaming together. That's so important to carry forward, especially when we get into the daily grind. I call it the time to make the donuts daily grind. Remember that commercial? I'm dating myself, but remember the Dunkin' Donuts commercial where the guy's alarm goes off every morning and he sits up in bed and he's like stretching. He's like, time to make the donuts. That's so much our lives when we enter into that stage of our family lives and of our relationships of building careers, of raising kids, of the monotony of the day in and day out, where we lose that focus on each other. So it is work, but it doesn't have to be as hard and heavy as we oftentimes make it. Another myth that we take on and we think of when we are thinking about marriages and relationships, either overtly or covertly. Maybe we don't, intentionally in the front of our consciousness think these things, but they're kind of floating around in our brains. Another one of those myths is, man, if I were married to someone else, I would not have this problem. If I didn't have this partner, then this wouldn't be a problem. And there we go, solution, problem solved, right? Only not so much, because the truth of the matter is every relationship has its perpetual problems. John and Julie Gottman, who have done 4 decades worth of research on relationships and what makes relationships successful and where we kind of get caught in the weeds. Recognize that every relationship has its perpetual problems. If it's not finances in this one, then it's family dynamics in that one, right? So there's always going to be some kind of problem. So if it's not this problem with this partner, it's simply going to be another problem with another partner. Our challenge in working through these perpetual problems is to, one, recognize they're a problem and recognize kind of our dance around the problem, the way that we try to interact with each other and kind of don't do that successfully. And then create a way of having conversation about these things, right? These perpetual problems are usually those non-negotiable points for each one of us where it feels like way too big, and where in other situations and other areas of the relationship we can make compromises, but it's much harder for us to do these based on our values and our integrity on these stuck points, on these perpetual problems. So it's creating a way of talking with each other about these things, right? It's not necessarily finding a specific solution, because if there were one, you would have found one already. It's creating a process about talking about them. And then, so that leads me to myth number 5. We really need to improve our communication skills. This is the number one thing that I hear from couples when they come in for counseling, for help with their relationships. And the fact of the matter is, we already know how to communicate. I mean, we really do. When you think about it, you have the tools and the skills to communicate. Now, we could probably hone some of those skills. I mean, none of us is perfect in the way that we do things. But the fact of the matter is, you have hard conversations with other people in your lives. When you are at work and have a conflict with a coworker, you don't typically up the ante and scream and yell about that. So we have the skills to communicate. We could use some support and some building up of those muscles of taking the skills that we have and bringing them to our marriages and to our romantic relationships where things feel so important and when the stakes feel so much higher. And what I have found in working with couples and what I've found in my own relationship and being married almost 23 years now is that when I hear those words, like we need to improve our communication skills, what I read underneath that is I really want to feel safe enough to connect intimately and vulnerably with my spouse so that I can have a hard conversation, so that I can be seen and heard and valued with respect. So that's what I read between those lines of, we need to improve our communication, is that really I want it to be able to have a hard conversation with my partner and for them to come alongside of me and say, I see you and I hear you, and maybe I don't agree with what you're saying, but we're in this together. So if any of these myths as far as our marriages and relationships are sounding familiar to you, aren't they familiar? Aren't these things that we just kind of assume about our relationships? And then when we're in the midst of our marriages, we're like, man, what is happening here? I did not expect this, right? If you and your partner could use some support, know that we are here at Harper Therapy as your home for hope, growth, and healing in your relationship, in your marriage, in your family. So don't hesitate to reach out and give us a call. Set up an appointment for a free consultation so that we can talk with you about how we can help you in your marriage and in your relationship to be seen and heard and valued and respected, and to have some fun and play and dream together. So happy Thursday. You guys have a great day.